Entropy arrow of time. Big Bang. The most popular theory of universe creation telling us 13.7 billion years ago our universe was a very tiny, smaller than an atom, which may be called a singularity. There was no space, no time. Then suddenly there was a boom. And at that movement, time also came to existence. Our universe started to expand. For detail, you can see my previous documentary on how the universe was made, where I have explained each epoch of universe creation in detail. But at that singularity stage, there was another thing, or we can say the law of physics existed. That was entropy, which was at least stage. Or our universe was the most ordered stage. And according to our universe expanded, our entropy also increased with reference to time. So if you're back on time, then our entire universe has to run backward. Means again from disorder to order stage. The entropy has to decrease again with time. But here, the main conflict arises. And this is because of quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics, also another hand of modern physics, which developed with classical physics by some renowned physicists in early 19th centuries, which is not only a theory but a reality of particle in very micro level or subatomic level. And all the modern technology, modern equipment are based on this theory. And this conflict also arises to decide how universe is created. Einstein predicted that space-time began at the Big Bang singularity and would come to an end either at the Big Crunch singularity. Again, we know that in a black hole it would destroy any matter that will fall into the whole singularity. And only the gravitational effect of its mass would continue to be felt outside. On the other hand, when quantum effects were taken into account, it seemed that the mass or energy of the matter would eventually be returned to the rest of the universe, and that the black hole, along with any singularity inside it, would evaporate away and finally disappear. What really happened during the very early or late stages of the universe? When a gravitational field was so strong that quantum effects cannot be ignored. Does the universe in fact have a beginning or an end? And if so, what are they like? And the most important question is, what is information? Do we understand completely what information is? What is its role in entropy and time? In my view, if you'll succeed to reveal the relation between information, entropy, and time with relation to both relativity and quantum mechanics, then only we can reveal the secret of nature, God, and consciousness of intelligent creature. This This film is based on the most unsolved question in nature to reveal in a scientific way, like why the time has a direction, why the universe has a low entropy in the past, why CP violation is related to thermodynamic, what is causality, is there a single possible past, what is consciousness, what quantum arrow of time, and finally, when the content is about the most complex reality of the universe, it will be a little longer. And it will need more patience to see the whole video without skipping for any rating. Let us start the video with understanding entropy briefly. Hi, I'm Tamanna. Again came with a new episode, Entropy Arrow of Time. The story started a change of entropy from the order to disorder. To understand entropy deeply, we have to understand what information is, how it came to existence. If you ask what is information, information is information, not matter or energy. It is an only fundamental thing of a building of the universe. No materialism which does not admit this can survive in the present day. Then, simply we can say information is a communication of an idea. But when we go more deeply, then we find all these universal things such as matter, energy, light, laws of nature, which we think the fundamental building block of the universe. All these are made from a single thing called information. Or we can say anything in this universe, including space and time, is also made from the information. Or in mythology, we tell it the idea of God or God itself, and the entropy is the exchange of information. The oldest forms of human communication. Some of the oldest forms of human communication include talking or making sounds, drawing or painting, dancing, acting. Long after intelligent life creation in the earth, few animals like monkeys, apes, and humans have evolved specialized mechanisms for producing sound for purposes of social communication. But they did not use the tongue for such purposes. But human, unprecedented, used the tongue, lips, and other movable parts. And that was the vital point for human to become the most advanced species, to reveal the real power of information. Because due to the use of tongue for voice and simultaneously using other parts, humans were able to express the emotion by specific gesture like laughs, cries, together with involuntary gestures accompanying speech. And due to that, their brain also became advanced in decoding of information from someone as well as supply information to someone. And the humans won the race and became the most developed creatures. Human communication was revolutionized with the origin of speech approximately 500,000 BCE. Symbols were developed about 30,000 years ago. The imperfection of speech, which nonetheless allowed easier dissemination of ideas, and eventually resulted in creating alternative forms of communications, improving at which people were able to make the information long-lasting. The next advancement in the history of communications came with the production of petroglyphs carving into a rock surface. It took about 20,000 years for Homo sapiens to move from the first cave paintings to the first petroglyphs, which are dated to approximately the Neolithic and late Upper Paleolithic boundary, about 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. It took about 20,000 years for Homo sapiens to move from the first cave paintings to the first petroglyphs, which are dated to approximately the Neolithic and late Upper Paleolithic boundary, about 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. And the information marched to the shape of the picture. The pre-mechanical age was the earliest age of information technology. The two places where it is almost certain that the concept of writing was both conceived and developed independently are in ancient Sumer in Mesopotamia between 3500 and 3300 BC, and much later in Mesoamerica by 300 BC, because no precursors have been found to either of these in their respective regions. Similarly, Sanskrit also was the language of ancient India with a 3,500-year history. It was the primary holy language of Hinduism. Although writing systems also arose in Egypt around 3100 BC and around 2000 BC in the Jia dynasty was developed completely independently. During the 17th and 18th centuries, letters were used to self-educate, self-expressive writing, polemically writing, and also exchange ideas with like-minded others. But for communicating over a distance, people used visual signals such as beacons, smoke signals, signal flags, coded drum beats, long-blown horns, and loud whistles. The first telegraph developed in the 1830s and 1840s by Samuel Morse, and between 1791 to 1872, other inventors for long-distance communications. Information started to go through electricity. But what about entropy? What is relation of entropy with time? Change of entropy, or the second law of thermodynamics, states that the total entropy of an isolated system can never decrease over time and is constant only if all processes are reversible. Or we can say, isolated systems spontaneously evolve towards thermodynamic equilibrium, the state with maximum entropy. In all processes that occur, including spontaneous processes, the total entropy of the system and its surroundings increases, and the process is irreversible in the thermodynamic sense. Or simply, disorder increases with time because we measure time in the direction in which disorder increases. The increase in entropy accounts for the irreversibility of natural processes and the asymmetry between future and past. In 19th century, understanding of time is changed by a remarkable scientist, Albert Einstein, and his theory of relativity. He gave an idea about time dilation in his both theory, special relativity and general relativity. To understand in detail, you can see my detailed series, Special Relativity and General Relativity. The main objective of this theory is time is not absolute. Time can slow or fast according to the speed, or everybody has its own personal and private time. What we see happen is that the clock in motion slows down according to our clock. Therefore, we read two different times. Which time is correct? Well, they both are correct because time is not absolute but is relative. It depends on the reference frame. Let's take an example. There are two twin astronauts. One astronaut left for a deep space trip, traveling at 95% the speed of light. Upon returning, the astronaut's clock had measured 10 years, so astronaut's age increased 10 years. However, when the astronaut reunites with his twin on Earth, he saw that the twin age has increased 32 years. It explains due to the fact that the astronaut's twin is traveling at relativistic speed and therefore his clock has been slowed down. But another factor came to existence during understanding the time, that is causality. In classical physics, an effect cannot occur before its cause. Or, for a better understanding, one event, process, or state or a cause contributes to the production of another event, process, or state or an effect where the cause is responsible for the effect and the effect is dependent on the cause. But in general, a process has many causes, which are also said to be causal factors for it, and all lies in its past. An effect can turn to be cause of or causal factor for many other effects, which lie in its future. So, it restricts our past moments. But why should the thermodynamic arrow of time exist at all? Or, in other words, why should the universe be in a state of high order at one end of time, which is called the past? Why is it not in a state of complete disorder at all times? After all, this might seem more probable. And why is the direction of time in which disorder increases the same as that in which the universe expands? In theory of general relativity, one cannot predict how the universe would have begun, because all the known laws of science would have broken down at the Big Bang singularity. The universe could have started out in a very smooth and ordered state. This would have led to well-defined thermodynamic and cosmological arrow of time, as we observe. But it could equally well have started out in a very lumpy and disordered state. In that case, the universe would already be in a state of complete disorder. So disorder could not increase with time. It would either stay constant, in which case there would be no well-defined thermodynamic arrow of time, or it would decrease, in which case the thermodynamic arrow of time would point in the opposite direction to the cosmological arrow. Neither of these possibilities agrees with what we observe. However, as we have seen, classical general relativity predicts its own downfall. When the curvature of space-time becomes large, Quantum gravitational effects will become important, and the classical theory will cease to be a very good description of the universe. But what would happen if the universe stopped expanding and began to contract? Would the thermodynamic error reverse and disorder begin to decrease with time? This would lead to all sorts of, would we see the tea gathering back themselves together off and jumping back onto the kettle? Or juice will gather back to the glass with the thermodynamic error reverse and disorder will begin to decrease with time? Let us do an experiment. A quicker way to find out what will happen when we jump into a black hole. The collapse of a star to form a black hole is rather like the later stages of the collapse of the whole universe. So, if disorder were to decrease in the contracting phase of the universe, one might also expect it to decrease inside a black hole. So perhaps an astronaut who fell into a black hole would be able to remember the future. In a period of 1831 to 1879, the science got a golden age due to a Scottish scientist called James Clerk Maxwell. Maxwell was the third greatest physicist of all time, leveled with Newton and Einstein. His most notable achievement was to formulate the classical theory of electromagnetic radiation, bringing together for the first time electricity, magnetism, and light as different manifestations of the same phenomenon, for which he is regarded as a founder of electrical engineering. A part of that achievement, he was the first person who understood that temperature and heat are caused only by molecular movement. And he was the first to apply probability and statistics to describe temperature changes at the molecular level. But he was not stopped there. In 1867, he suggested a remarkable thought experiment called Maxwell's demon, which is based on how the second law of thermodynamics can hypothetically be violated. To understand Maxwell's demon thought experiment, we have to understand what thermodynamics law is. What is entropy, and what is its relation with information and time? The laws of thermodynamics describe the relations between thermal energy or heat and other forms of energy and how energy affects matter. The first law of thermodynamics states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. The total quantity of energy in the universe stays the same. The definition of entropy was developed in the early 1850s by RUDOLF CLAUSIUS. He described how to measure the entropy of an isolated system in thermodynamic equilibrium. Generally, entropy is defined as a measure of randomness or disorder of a system. Apart from the general definition, there are several definitions of entropy. The two definitions of entropy that I want to discuss here to understand my content. They are the thermodynamic definition and the statistical definition. From a thermodynamics viewpoint of entropy is used to describe the behavior of a system in terms of thermodynamic properties, such as temperature, pressure, entropy, and heat capacity of equilibrium state of the systems. Whereas in statistical definition, which were defined in terms of the statistics of the molecular motions of a system, or we can say entropy is a measure of the molecular disorder. The second law of thermodynamics is about the quality of energy. It states that as energy is transferred or transformed, more and more of it is wasted. Second law of thermodynamics. According to concepts of entropy and spontaneity, the second law of thermodynamics has a number of definitions. Number 1. All naturally occurring spontaneous processes are thermodynamically irreversible. Number 2. Complete transmission of heat into work is thermodynamically not feasible without wastage of a certain amount of energy. Number 3. The entropy of the universe is continuously increasing. Number 4. Total entropy change is always positive. The entropy of a system plus entropy of surrounding will be greater than 0. But Max will not stop there, because Maxwell was the first person who understood that heat energy is the motion of molecules or vibration of molecules. Means more the heat, the faster the motion of molecule. And the genius did a very advanced thought experiment at that time with this understanding to violate second law of thermodynamics that entropy can decrease with a very sharp information, which is called as Maxwell-Demon thought experiment. Let us understand what that was. The second law of thermodynamics tells that two bodies of different temperature, when brought into contact with each other and isolated from the rest of the universe, those will evolve to a thermodynamic equilibrium in which both bodies have approximately the same temperature. The second law is also expressed as the assertion that in an isolated system, entropy never decreases. But Maxwell thought that if we will develop a technology that can collect the information of every molecule motion of a system and segregate them to different systems according to the information of their motion without using energy, then we can violate the second law, or we can decrease the entropy by use of information, or we can run an engine without heat, or more advance the entropy marched backward with backward of time in basis of information. Or we can build a time machine in base of information, or we would be able to do what is impossible to us. Let us understand his thought experiment. There is a vessel full of air at uniform temperature, but the gas molecules inside the vessel are moving with velocities by no means uniform. Though the mean velocity is almost exactly uniform, now we divided that vessel into two portions, A and B. And between that divisions, we kept a small hole. And we kept a demon who can see and measure the individual molecules' motion. Taking an average motion as standard, the demon opens and closes this hole for faster motion individual molecule to chamber A and slower motion molecule to chamber B, by which the demon can develop higher temperature and pressure in chamber A without energy, which can be used for useful work or change in entropy from disorder to order. That means Maxwell's demon transferred thermodynamic entropy of a system to the information about the states of individual molecules. And With that information, he made disorder to order. Or we can say change of entropy is first time hypothetically regulated by information.
But what was the real output of the experiment? The output of the experiment was we can make a machine or making disorder to order by breaking thermodynamics' second law without use of energy. Or making a machine to go to the past only by mimicking Maxwell's demon. Or simply we can say all the things we can do without energy but by handling information. Or all things in this universe, very fundamental level, are just some informations, nothing more.
The experiment till now a controversial for scientists whether Maxwell was right or wrong. Because to convert the motion of all gas molecule, the demon need a memory in his brain. Again, after a finite time, the memory of demon will fill, and the demon have to erase some information to collect more memory, which again increase the entropy. But Maxwell was the scientist who thought a sharp machine which can convert all the complex thing and think around the nature to information, and regulate and give a result though processing the information, which was Maxwell's demon, and presently called as computer. Ludwig Boltzmann. Ludwig Boltzmann is generally acknowledged as one of the most important physicists of the 19th century, particularly famous for his statistical explanation of the second law of thermodynamics. He gave a formula S equals to K log W, expressing a relation between entropy and probability that has been engraved on his tombstone. But what about time? Why time have a direction? Is really time having a direction or all are illusion? The arrow of time, also called time's arrow, is the concept positing the one-way direction or asymmetry of time. It was developed in 1927 by the British astrophysicist Arthur Eddington. So what is arrow of time? Arrow of time refers to the one-way direction or asymmetry of time. The past lies behind us and is fixed and immutable and accessible by memory or written documentation. The future, on the other hand, lies ahead and is not necessarily fixed, and although we can perhaps predict it to some extent, we have no firm evidence or proof of it. And in present, the most of the events we experience are irreversible. For example, let us break a bottle. After breaking, it is impossible to unbreak the same which is already broken. That means we perceive the time with change of entropy. This idea came from second law of the thermodynamic. Second law of thermodynamics states that as one goes forward in time, the net entropy or degree of disorder of any isolated or closed system will always increase or at least stay the same. So, we observed in microscopic level, time is having a forward direction. But why does disorder increase in the same direction of time as that in which the universe expands? Is the arrow of time an illusion? Let us take an example. When we break a beer bottle, we knew that the before stage was past, and the bottle breaking was present or future. Because when we run the video backward, we can see bottle is unbreaked. Our mind remembers the past, but not the future. So we are saying it is past when the bottle is unbroken, and present or future when the bottle is break. And the arrow of time is simply moving from past to present to future. Suppose we take another example of pendulum and make a video. Then if we back the same, the video will also same. And it is difficult to distinguish which part of video is past and which is future. Or if our earth will revolve just opposite direction, what is it present revolving then? We cannot distinguish that day came after night or night came after day. Or simply, time is reversed for us or forward for us. Or we can say it cannot come to original position by itself if we exactly reverse all the particles of that bottle. The perception of an arrow of time that we have in our everyday life therefore appears to be nothing more than that an illusion of consciousness in this model of the universe. An emergent quality that we happen to experience due to our particular kind of existence at this particular point in the evolution of the universe. Another branch of physics, the theory of relativity. The reality of the universe can be described by four-dimensional space-time, time dilation, or each particle have their private time, or no arrow of time, so that time does not actually flow, it just is. The perception of an arrow of time that we have in our everyday life therefore appears to be nothing more than an illusion of consciousness. When we consider special relativity, when the photon particle marched from Big Bang and reached till our eyeball, for photon particle, the time passed is zero. No arrow of time either forward or backward. When we research on quantum theory, particularly double-slit experiment, we found particle like photon or electron go in reverse of time or forward of time. Before we understand the double-slit experiment, let us understand what a wave is and why wave makes interference patterns. Wave is the propagation of disturbances from place to place in a regular and organized way. Most familiar are surface waves that travel on water. When two waves meet, then that is called the interference of waves. Waves that pass through two narrow parallel slits form an interference pattern on a screen. But in case of particle, no such things happen. Now come to double-slit experiment. Double-slit experiment. Let us understand what the double-slit experiment is. Suppose we fired electron to two slits. It should make two lines the screen behind the slit, because the electron is particles. But the weird of this experiment is we found there are a series of lines. Here the question may arise that there is nothing weird, because electrons are tiny and a bunch of electrons are choreographing like water molecules, making a wave, and because of that wave, interference pattern or series of line is coming. Then we changed the experiment little and we fired a single electron at a time. Then again the same, we found the series of lines like an interference pattern. Now we can say particles are acting like a wave, but a wave of what thing? Maybe that is the wave of probability, what the modern understanding of quantum theory is? Again, we did a slight change to see what exactly happens. We put a detector at one side after the slit as an observer and fire the electron at slits to see what is happening. Then, even more the weird thing that we saw. That was 50% time the detector beeped and other 50% time it didn't beep. Where had the other 50% electrons gone? And the pattern was again in two lines. This means either electron having a super consciousness to communicate other slit electron by going to the past and telling to make a two-line pattern due to we are observing them, or each electron is passing through both slits at the same time, or we are still unable to understand the reality of the universe and time. A group of scientists tried a variation on the double-slit experiment called the delayed choice experiment. The scientists placed a special crystal at each slit. The crystal splits any incoming photons into a pair of identical photons. One photon from this pair should go on to create the standard interference pattern, while the other travels to a detector. Perhaps with this setup, physicists might successfully find a way to observe the logic-defying behavior of photons. But it still doesn't work. And here's the really weird part. It does not work regardless of when that detection happens. Even if the second photon is detected after the first photon hits the screen, it still ruins the interference pattern. This means that observing a photon can change events that have already happened. Scientists are still thinking how exactly this whole thing works, because photons and electrons like subatomic particles are the reality of our visual universe. Again, if we try to understand time through electron entanglement, we knew according to quantum physics, particles are in superposition. And when we measure one particle's spin, then we see its other partner's spin in exactly opposite at the same time, no matter what is the distance between them, maybe other galaxy or other corner of universe. Again, if an observer measured the partner's spin at the same time, the particle's spin is exactly opposite. So, for one observer, it is effect, where other observer it is cause, and vice versa at the same instant of time. So quantum physics did not believe cause should come before effect, rather than cause and effect will be at same time.
So, how can this particle work so weird manner? How they react with observed or non-observed? How they work so intelligently moving past and future? Do they have consciousness which is far advanced than human? But in my view, the answer is not there. But we don't understand time properly. Or time running forward, what we think is a misconception.
And our consciousness or our brain only remembers the past, not the future, to support the illusion like forward movement of time. There is no forward time or no backward time or no arrow. Simple no past, no future, no starting of time or no end in nature. Only present, just like a frozen river. All the weird things we are trying to understand, like particle superposition, particle entanglement, time dilation, one particle at a time in different position, are due to our understanding about arrow of time. And the passing of time, what we are perceiving, is only an illusion, because we all are under the second law of thermodynamics, and our understanding of order to disorder with respect to time is an illusion.
But how we can accept time is a frozen river where there is no past and no future? Because we all feel time passing from past to present to future. Please see my upcoming video, Entropy Arrow of Time Part 2, where I discussed more deeply about Stephen Hawking's view on imaginary time, and many more unsolved questions like CPT symmetry. Till now, thanks for watching my video.